Fighting the Global Drug Trade, next on International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs at UWM and Milwaukee Public Television present International Focus, a global magazine linking Wisconsin and the world.
Welcome to International Focus. I'm Doug Savage, Assistant Director of the Institute of World Affairs at UWM. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, global drug trafficking generates nearly $400 billion per year. By far the most lucrative form of organized criminal activity, the global drug trade provides a revenue stream for terrorism and violent insurgent movements worldwide. Policymakers and law enforcement officials are increasingly characterizing the global drug trade as a major security threat to the U.S. Seemingly distant drug trafficking organizations are having a direct impact on communities across the U.S. Here in Wisconsin, for example, criminal organizations based in Mexico, the Dominican Republic, and Nigeria are responsible for much of the area's wholesale distribution of illegal drugs. To combat the global drug trade, Drug Enforcement Administration has developed America's largest overseas law enforcement presence. With 83 offices in 62 countries, they work with host governments to assess drug threats, gather intelligence, and target major drug trafficking organizations. Here to tell us more about the fight against the global drug trade and its impact on Main Street America, we're joined by DEA Assistant Special Agent James Bohn, 25-year veteran of the agency. He currently leads the DEA operation in Wisconsin. Assistant Special Agent Bohn, welcome to International Focus.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm wondering if you could just start with a little bit of background on just the scale of the global drug trade, and where the suppliers are, where the consumers are, and just how big of a problem are we talking about?
Well, the first thing you have to understand, it is a global drug trade. You have to understand that there's source countries out there, and there's also consumer countries. And it depends on what type of drug is a source country. South America, Colombia, that's a source country and a source area for cocaine. A lot of heroin comes from 4 particular different parts of the world. It comes from Mexico, South America, Southeast or Southwest Asia. We have all different types of drugs, and it really makes a difference on what type of drug that you're talking about.
And, I think we often think of sort of the Latin American source and the North American consumer relationship. Who are the other consumers around the world?
Consumers can be, Europe has a particular drug problem with cocaine right now. In addition, most of the Afghan heroin from Southwest Asia ends up in Europe as well. In Japan, for example, they have a methamphetamine problem. So the problem can be regionalized depending on what type of drug and the demand for it.
And is there really that split between producing countries and consuming countries? Is there much of a consumption problem in the source countries as well, or does it all go off their shores?
Now, the source countries all have their own consumer problem as well, but they're making money, though, in the U.S. and other areas by selling it and importing it, definitely.
And has the enterprise changed? I mean, I mentioned in the opening, you've been at this for 25 years. Have you seen sort of an evolution of the way the business is done?
In many ways we have, and it's in response to law enforcement's efforts, in response to their business models. These are multinational, international businesses. To take cocaine, for example, 20 years ago the cocaine came from Colombia, and it came up through the Caribbean. Just about 90% of the cocaine was coming through the Caribbean, and it was passed off to a Colombian transportation cell. And then when it got to the U.S., it went to a Colombian distribution cell. And then eventually, because of the law enforcement pressure that was put on in the Caribbean, that shifted, and it shifted to the Mexican cartels. The Colombian cartels approached the Mexican cartels and started paying them in money to transport their cocaine up into the U.S. And the Mexican cartels could do that because they had been transporting marijuana and heroin into the U.S. for generations. And that's how they got their relationship started. And then what happened was that the Colombian cartels began to pay the Mexican cartels in product. So if they had a 1,000-kilo load of cocaine, for example, they would let them keep 250 kilos as their payment. So when it got up into the U.S., 750 would go to a Colombian distribution cell and 250 to a Mexican distribution cell. But at that time, the Mexicans didn't have necessarily the distribution cells for cocaine that they do now, and they developed those over time. And so now what you have really is the Colombian cartels selling their loads of cocaine to the Mexican cartels, who then take them into the U.S., import them into the U.S., and sell them by themselves with their Mexican distribution cells. So that's been a big change for us. 20 years ago, we were looking at a lot of Colombian organizations operating in the U.S. Now we're looking at a lot more Mexican distribution organizations operating in the U.S. Colombia is still responsible for the majority of the cocaine coming into the U.S., but now most of it comes through Mexico. That's why you see one of the reasons you see the Mexican cartels becoming so powerful in the last 10 years.
And what about that last part of the supply chain? I mean, are there Mexican or Colombian or whomever nationals distributing it at the street, or at some point is there a nexus with sort of indigenous sellers?
Oh, absolutely. What happens is it comes up wholesale, and the wholesalers sell it to mid-level retailers and down to the street. I describe Wisconsin as a destination state because we are somewhat at the end of that food chain. And we have significant distribution cells and trafficking cells here in Wisconsin. We have some Mexicans, but we also have substantial other types of organizations as well. With our proximity to Chicago, we're a prime target for the cells that operate in Chicago. We're prime customers for their area. But as a destination state up here, if the cocaine, for example, is brought into Wisconsin in a wholesale quantity or otherwise, it's usually going to be consumed or distributed around Wisconsin. It's probably meant to be here.
Well, we'll get to sort of the other uses of those funds in a minute, so narco-terrorism, that kind of thing. But are the people that are profiting from this involved in other kinds of things? I mean, what is the money used for? Just to make the people rich and that's that? Or is it funneled into other criminal enterprises?
Well, there's always crime associated with drug trafficking. Not every organization out there deals just in drugs. They have other crimes that they involve themselves with. But a good portion of the money, at least from those large cartels, the international cartels, a good portion does get funneled back into various terrorist-type organizations, global terrorist organizations as well. And the money is a problem. It's certainly all about the money. It's all about the profit. But when you take a market like in the United States, where it's a cash business, at the retail level, it's a cash business. You get paid in cash. Cash takes up a lot of room. Cash has to be counted. It has to be processed. So it's a problem for the organizations to get that money back to where it needs to go. And
what about at the other end of the chain, at the highest level? I mean, who are these people? If you go to the pinnacle of one of these organizations.
Well, a lot of them work their way. Let's take some Mexican cartel members, for example. A lot of them work their way up through particular ranks. There's a number of large cartels that operate in Mexico. The Los Zetas, for example, they start out as an enforcement arm for some of the other cartels, but now they've branched off into their own drug trafficking activities. And eventually, through their own internal struggles, someone will rise to the top and become the leader of those cartels. And each cartel has a leadership structure, more or less. And then as law enforcement is successful and we take off those leaders, then you have a void which gets filled eventually.
And is that what we've seen in Mexico in the last few years? The violence seems to have ramped up considerably. Is that that sort of situation, or is it just response to the Calderon government's push against the cartels?
It's both. You're seeing two struggles really going on. One is the struggle between the cartels and the government because of the government's pushback and Calderon's response. And the second is once you have successes like Calderon has been having, then you're going to have voids, and then you're going to have infighting to fill those voids, and you're seeing some of that as well.
And is it sort of there's the carnival game of whack-a-mole where you hit the little creature down and he pops up somewhere else? Do we see some of that in the global drug trade? I mean, if you have a success in one area particularly, you mentioned, for example, the Caribbean became unfriendly territory for the traffickers, and then they moved to Mexico. Is there any kind of phenomenon where we might see something crossing the border? I've heard some people make the claim that, well, if you make northern Mexico very unfriendly, what you're essentially going to do is transplant the violence north of the border, and we see some of that in U.S. border towns. Is that
Well, we take all the information and the intelligence that we can gather, and we try to be one step ahead of all those cartels and try to anticipate what they might do next. But certainly the cartels are very well financed, very well resourced. But we're always looking for that next potential problem to pop up and try to get ahead of that game as well.
And what are the challenges anywhere, really, but I think the sort of stereotypical case is in Latin America, where because of the amount of money involved, you've got that intersection between the governments in the source countries and these cartels, and there's the phenomenon of plato or plomo, or silver or lead. So that whereas a public official is presented with that choice by the cartel of, we can either pay you or we can shoot you. Which would you prefer?
Well, in Mexico, you've certainly seen some of that. Mexico has been known for a certain level of corruption. But with the steps that President Calderon has taken, we, right now, in the U.S. government, or at least in the Drug Enforcement Administration, have had unprecedented levels of cooperation right now. We're seeing unprecedented levels of success as far as targeting these high-level targets down in Mexico. So we think he's definitely on the right track, and we're there to support that.
We're going to take a break in just a few minutes, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about the origins and the mission of the Drug Enforcement Administration.
Sure. DEA's mission is to target, disrupt, and dismantle the major drug trafficking organizations that are responsible for the manufacture, transportation, and the distribution of drugs. What sets DEA apart and what makes us unique as an agency is that we do have a worldwide presence. We have offices, domestic offices in every state, and more than one office in almost most states. But we have 83 offices in 63 different countries. And we've had that since our inception because we're a single mission agency. We're in each one of those countries voluntarily because each one of those countries has their own drug concerns. And they allowed us to come in to help them with their problem, but to also help us with our problem in the U.S. But it allows us to expand our investigations so that if we have an investigation here in Wisconsin and we get information about a trafficker at the southwest border possibly, and we have information about a trafficker possibly in Mexico, we can work with our host counterparts in Mexico to continue that investigation as far as we need to go, and eventually hopefully be able to extradite all those criminals so that when we look at something, we look at it organizationally. We're not as concerned about the guy just standing on the street corner selling drugs. We want to find out who his source was and then find out who his source was all the way back into the host countries.
So your concern is much more with organizations rather than individuals.
Yes, we try to look at things organizationally. It was explained to me years ago when I was a younger agent that there's a lot of local jurisdictions out there who are responsible for smaller areas, and they work independently with their drug problem in their area. And if no one connects those dots, you don't get a chance to see that bigger picture. And part of our mission is to help connect those dots so that we connect them, so that we can see the national and international aspects of these organizations.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about the international aspects after a short break. To our viewers, we'll be right back with more International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
Welcome back to International Focus. We're talking about global drug trafficking with James Bohn from the Drug Enforcement Administration. Well, you mentioned DEA has a presence in 62 countries around the world. Does that shift? I mean, do priorities shift and resources follow?
Well, absolutely. We're not in Venezuela right now. They asked us to leave and we left. However, we're in countries all around Venezuela. We've now recently upped our manpower in Afghanistan, naturally, because of the increase in the opium poppy growth over there, to assist with that war as well. So yes, we can shift our manpower around where we need it.
And just as kind of an HR aspect of this, I mean, you're not in the military, you're a civilian law enforcement officer. If your colleagues are asked to serve in Afghanistan, which is a war zone. Is it a voluntary assignment, or can you just be placed there? I know in some other situations there's been concern that people might not want to go.
No, in our agency, it's entirely voluntary to go overseas. And in places like Afghanistan, you go through specialized training, kind of paramilitary training to make sure that you're qualified and able to be over there and function effectively.
And, particularly with Afghanistan, but in other areas as well, there's earlier been kind of an emphasis on just eradicating the crops. And has there been a shift a bit away from that?
Well, from our perspective, we're looking for drug trafficking organizations that are operating in Afghanistan. There's only about 5% of Southwest Asian heroin makes it into the United States currently. The rest usually goes up through Africa or directly into Europe. But our concern over there is we don't want to return to where we were 30 years ago when the United States did have a significant heroin problem with Southwest Asian heroin. And in addition, we know that there's direct ties between a lot of the heroin trafficking money and that which goes back to into these global terrorist organizations as well.
And how does that happen? I can see, trafficking organizations using terrorist tactics, but in the case of an organization that is much more political than just interested in a fast profit, how does that money get to a organization if they're not directly involved?
Well, they provide money in several ways, and they provide several different services. Some of the terrorist organizations provide protection for particular areas or transportation routes for a lot of these drug trafficking organizations. So they will pay them a tax or they will pay them a fee for protection and to keep themselves safe. Some themselves will be somewhat involved in whatever trafficking it is. So again, they will take over and actually become drug traffickers themselves. The FARC in Colombia has transitioned from being a straight protection paramilitary organization into now a drug trafficking organization itself.
Well, I think that's a criticism that has been leveled, that they really have ceased to have any real political agenda, and they really are just criminals at this point.
That's correct. And they also assist each other with arms and trade arms back and forth. So the more the DEA can do to target the international drug trafficking organizations out there, the more direct or indirect impact we will have, hopefully, on the global terrorist organizations as well.
And to what extent do you interface with the other agencies that are dealing more directly with the terror threat?
Well, depending on the country and the level of the threats, we'll have certainly interaction in all those countries with the other agencies as well. But we are just focused on our mission and how it might overlap. We have two particular statutes that we rely on in the United States internationally to prosecute. And one is 21 U.S.C. 959, which basically says that if you're manufacturing or importing or somehow involved in the drug trade, knowing it's going to come into the U.S., that's a crime in the U.S. And we can use that. And then we have 960A, 21 U.S.C. 960A, which was part of the Patriot Act. And that says if you're involved in the drug trade and you know it's going to benefit a terrorist organization that's anti-American, then we can charge you with a crime in the U.S. for that as well. So we'll go ahead and try to figure out who we can charge with those and then extradite someone eventually.
So in a place like Afghanistan, and what does the DEA agent on the ground do typically?
Well, I can't say that I've been there, but we have teams of people that go over. We have 2 offices over there where the gentlemen are there permanently. And then we also have teams, what they call FAST teams, Foreign Advisory Support Teams, that go over on, I think it's 3 or 4 month deployments and then come back, and the teams rotate. And they assist the host country in identifying potential drug trafficking organizations, labs, those types of things, and help to point those things out, and then assist the U.S. military in eradicating drugs as well.
So we had a situation last fall where a number of your DEA colleagues were casualties in this war. What are they frequently in harm's way in that sense? I mean, are they involved in active combat?
They are in harm's way over there, definitely. I mean, we have lost 3 agents over there with the helicopter crash. But yes, they're going out into the field with the host countries, and we don't have arrest powers overseas, but we go out and participate to the level that the country will allow us, to the level our rules allow us and the country's rules allow us. And
obviously it would vary from place to place, but in general, I mean, who are your counterparts in the host governments, and you know, what has DEA's experience generally been?
So far, the experience has been relatively positive. We certainly don't like to lose agents. That wasn't something that we had hoped would happen over there. But it is, in working in these countries, it gives us a chance to then train their agents and their officers and their military people that we interact with, and then help them identify traffickers and then eventually maybe even extradite some into the U.S.
And do you have to deal with this phenomenon of just the corrosive effect of the money involved when you're dealing with your counterparts? I mean, is there any instances where you feel that frustration of, well, maybe this isn't the guy we should be dealing with?
We certainly take every precaution and every measure to vet the people that we do work with. And we rely on the host country, and then also rely on our intelligence and the information that we've gathered to make sure that we're working with the right people.
And just taking it back domestically again, then is there anything you've seen locally in Wisconsin that's really changed in the last, well, certainly within the last 25 years that you've been at this? I mean, how has it evolved in terms of the local scene?
I've been in Wisconsin now for 10 years, and I have seen a few things change. One thing in particular is the heroin. The heroin now, not just in Wisconsin, but all over the country, has become much more pure. The South Americans introduced South American heroin to the United States about 15 years ago, and it has a much higher purity level, which means that you can snort it or smoke it. So you don't have to use the needle to inject yourself and get high. And that opened up a whole new class of users out there. So we see a lot more younger people using drugs now, oftentimes heroin. So it's a little disappointing to see someone using a drug as strong as heroin. So that's been a change for us. Lately, we've been seeing a lot of prescription drug abuse. We see a lot of kids out there taking prescription drugs in the way that they weren't intended, and that's always a dangerous situation as well. And then you add in the internet and what people can get over online. That's been a change over the last 10 years. So there's been significant changes, not just in Wisconsin, but also across the entire country.
Well, and one argument that I'm sure you've heard before is, if the problem is the amount of money generated by the drug trade, why not just legalize it and deny the cartels that revenue stream? How would you respond to an argument like that?
A couple arguments. One is, first of all, DEA is not a policy agency. But the other is these drugs are harmful. They're not harmful because they're illegal. They're illegal because they are harmful. And I'm not sure how you would take a drug, let's say like heroin, legalize that, and put that out into society and not have definite problems with that. And I'd hate to think that we would allow people to basically self-medicate with heroin to the extent that they're hooked, and now we have a whole user population out there. So I think that due to the dangers of a lot of these drugs, I think they do need to be illegal.
Mm-hmm. And what do you see moving forward in terms of the environment in which you work? I mean, what kinds of things are you really looking out for? I mean, how do you see the environment changing in the next few years?
Well, I think we're going to continue to do what we do, but we are constantly looking at our intelligence. Both, let's say we look at intelligence here in Wisconsin on what's going on. We'll look at it nationally. We compare notes, what's going on nationally and internationally as well to try to get ahead of the curve. Resources are always an issue. We're a relatively small agency. We only have about 4,200 agents worldwide, so it gets spread fairly thin. So we try to involve ourselves in just the investigations where we think we can get the biggest bang for our buck and really disrupt or dismantle a major organization out there.
And do you see the players changing at all internationally?
They probably will. It's always difficult to anticipate where the next big players might pop up, especially when you look at it globally, and especially when you see some of the different problems out there. As I mentioned before, one of my former supervisors is in Japan now. Methamphetamine is a big problem for him out there. Heroin's a big problem in certain parts of the world, and then cocaine is a big problem here in the United States. So it all varies.
Well, we've just got about a minute left. There may be people who are interested in a career in drug enforcement. What kinds of background would you suggest they try to get themselves?
We look for people with bachelor's degrees for the most part. We look for people that obviously have an interest in law enforcement and a little bit of life experience. And everything else we can teach you through our training academy.
Very good. Well, James Bohn, I would like to thank you for being with us, and keep up the good work. To our viewers, we look forward to seeing you next time on International Focus.
About the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220 or visit us at our website,